The stars hung still and indifferent in the void as the colony of Zytherian began its day. Commander Elias Varn stood on the observation deck of the central outpost, watching the twin suns crest the jagged horizon. For years, Zytherian had been humanity's frontier, a testament to their resilience in carving life out of hostile worlds. The air smelled faintly of the new crops that had finally taken root. Progress, hope, and yet an unease gnawed at him. The first alarm shattered the quiet like glass. A flash of light streaked across the upper atmosphere, followed by another, then dozens more. The comm officer's voice broke through the intercom, tight with panic. Multiple inbound signatures. Unidentified. High velocity. Varn's chest tightened as his training kicked in. He grabbed his communicator. All stations defensive positions. Civilians to shelters. Now, within moments, the sky turned to fire. The Averix, a coalition of predatory alien species known for their ruthless expansionism, had made their move. Zytherian had been a tempting target for years, its mineral-rich crust and strategic location too valuable to ignore. The first orbital bombardment tore through the agricultural districts, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Screams echoed over the comm channels as the second wave obliterated the eastern colonies. Varn barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Deploy interceptors. Redirect power to the planetary shields. But the Averix were prepared. Their advanced weaponry bypassed defenses with cruel precision. Each impact reverberated through the command center, shaking walls and shattering screens. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Corwin, sprinted to his side, face pale. "Sir, we're losing shields. The generators can't keep up." Varn clenched his fists, his mind racing. "Evacuate who you can. Get the children and the injured off-world." But even as he spoke, he knew it was a desperate gamble. The Averix had the skies. No ship would make it past their blockade. Outside, the Earth began to split. The relentless bombardment disrupted the tectonic stability of Zytherian, creating deep fissures in the once solid ground. The rumble was deafening, the air thick with ash and the acrid smell of burning metal. Varn's heart sank as he saw the colony's main habitation dome collapse in the distance, engulfed in flames. As the bombardment continued, strange readings began to appear on the command center's consoles. Energy spikes, irregular and massive, radiated from beneath the planet's surface. The sensors couldn't identify the source, but the scale was off the charts. Corwin pointed to the screen, his voice trembling. "What the hell is that?" Varn stared at the data, his brow furrowing. He recalled the old stories told by the first settlers, dismissed as myths, legends of ancient guardians, creatures of unimaginable power, slumbering beneath Zytherian. They had been named dragons, though no one truly believed they existed. Until now, the comm crackled with a weak signal from a civilian outpost near the energy epicenter. A frantic voice came through. "Commander, the ground, it's alive. Something is moving. We need help. We." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Varn turned to Corwin. "Get me a line to Earth Command." Corwin hesitated but nodded, patching to the long-range transmitter. The response came almost instantly, a curt voice from a faceless officer. "Zytherian Command, you are ordered to cease all operations in the vicinity of the energy disturbances. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Varn slammed his fist onto the console. "They're telling us to stand down while we're being annihilated? What aren't they telling us?" But there was no time to argue. The fissures widened and the energy readings intensified, creating a tremor that threw the crew to the floor. Outside, the ground erupted, sending massive chunks of rock spiraling into the air. Something enormous was awakening. The Averix fleet, still raining destruction from above, shifted focus as the disturbance caught their attention. Several of their ships adjusted course, targeting the fissure. Varn watched on the monitors as plasma bolts descended, vanishing into the darkness. The ground shook violently, and then silence. For a moment, the battlefield stilled. A deafening roar shattered the quiet, deep and guttural, echoing across the landscape. From the fissure, a massive shape emerged, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Its scales gleamed like molten metal, its eyes burning with ancient fury. A dragon? No! Something more than a dragon. A biomechanical hybrid of flesh and machine, its design both alien and eerily familiar. The Averix ships opened fire, but the creature retaliated with a beam of concentrated energy that tore through their formation, obliterating 3 vessels in an instant. Varn stared, transfixed. It wasn't just one creature. More emerged, each distinct in size and form, their presence an overwhelming force of nature. The legends were true. These beings, these dragons, were no myth. They had been buried for millennia, dormant until the Avrix's greed awakened them. Corwin pulled Varn back to reality. "Sir, what do we do? Are they friend or foe?" Varn didn't answer immediately. He could feel the weight of the moment, the pivot on which the fate of humanity now rested. The dragons were powerful, but their purpose remained unclear. One thing was certain. Zytherian was no longer just a battlefield. It had become the epicenter of something far greater than any of them had imagined. "Prepare the survivors for evacuation," Varn finally said, his voice steady but grim. "And get me everything we have on those energy readings. If these things can stop the Averix, we need to know how." As the dragons turned their attention to the skies, unleashing their fury on the invaders, Varn felt the faintest glimmer of hope, but it was laced with dread. Whatever had been awakened beneath Zytherian was no simple ally. The war had just taken a turn, and humanity was no longer fighting alone. The fissure yawned wider, spewing ash and molten rock into the air. Commander Elias Varn stood at the edge of a crumbled ridge, the tremors beneath his feet growing more violent. His team of survivors, ragged and armed with what little they could salvage, stared in stunned silence. The creatures emerging from the abyss defied comprehension. Enormous, gleaming figures that blended organic majesty with mechanical precision. Their movements were fluid yet deliberate, every motion exuding power honed over countless millennia. The first dragon fully emerged, its head crowned with glowing horns that pulsed with energy. Its scales shimmered, reflecting the fiery chaos of the ruined landscape. It unfurled massive wings that shimmered with the intricate lattice of bioluminescent veins. When it turned its eyes toward Varn's group, the commander felt as though the weight of the cosmos bore down on him. The creature's gaze wasn't just intelligent. It was ancient assessing. A roar tore through the air, deeper and louder than any sound Varn had ever heard. It was a sound that spoke of rage, of defiance, of waking after eons of restless sleep. The vibrations made the ground tremble, forcing everyone to their knees. Behind the first dragon, others emerged. Smaller, faster forms flanked the behemoth, their movements precise and predatory. Together, they rose like titans from a forgotten age. "Commander," Corwin whispered, his voice hoarse, "what are they waiting for?" Before Varn could respond, the Averix fleet, circling like vultures, fired again. Plasma bolts rained down, slamming into the creatures. The lead dragon reared back, its chest glowing with an internal light. Then it unleashed a beam of raw energy, slicing through the heavens. 3 Averix ships disintegrated on impact, their debris scattering like ash. The remaining ships adjusted their positions, strafing the ground in an attempt to subdue the awakening titans. The dragons responded with terrifying precision, their bodies moving like living weapons, their attacks fueled by both fury and unparalleled technological mastery. Varn shouted to his team, pulling them to cover behind a jagged outcrop. "Stay down. Don't provoke them." A smaller dragon landed near them, its talons sinking deep into the scorched earth. Its body, sleek and angular, radiated heat, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, calculating intensity. It leaned down, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air around them. Varn's hand tightened on his weapon, but he didn't dare raise it. Any movement could be fatal. The dragon's gaze locked onto him, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it tilted its head. The gesture was unsettlingly familiar. Curiosity, caution, recognition. Before Varn could process the interaction, the dragon launched back into the sky with a thunderous beat of its wings, joining its kin in battle. As the Avorix fleet faltered under the onslaught, Varn's communicator crackled to life. A voice came through, distorted but urgent. "Zytherian Command, do you read? This is Captain Torin from the Earth flagship Solstice. We're en route, but still hours out. What the hell is happening down there?" Varn pressed the device to his ear, his voice strained. "Dragons. They're real, Captain. And they're tearing the Avorix apart. Dragons?" The disbelief was palpable, even through the static. "Clarify, Commander. They're massive, biomechanical, and they're fighting back. We don't know if they're with us or against us." Varn glanced toward the battlefield, where one of the dragons had speared an Avorix ship mid-flight, its claws slicing through the vessel's hull as though it were paper. "But they're winning." The line went silent for a moment before Torin responded. "Hold your position. Do not engage. We'll send reinforcements as soon as possible." Varn lowered the communicator, his jaw tightening. "As if we have a choice," he muttered under his breath. The ground beneath him shifted again, the tremors more erratic this time. Varn turned to Corwin, who was poring over a portable scanner. "What's causing that?" Corwin's face was pale, his voice shaky. "The energy signatures are stabilizing. It's like they're feeding off the planet, drawing power from it." Varn frowned. "Feeding? For what?" As if in answer, the largest dragon landed on the ridge above them, its shadow stretching long across the scorched ground. Up close, its size was staggering. Its chest glowed faintly, as if a furnace burned within it, and its breath came in slow, thunderous huffs. It lowered its head, bringing its immense eyes level with Varn. The commander's heart pounded as he held his ground. The creature spoke, its voice a low rumble that resonated through the air and into Varn's very bones. "Humans." The single word carried a weight of recognition, as though it had been spoken countless times before. "You disturb our slumber." Varn's throat felt dry, but he forced himself to respond. "We didn't mean to wake you. The Avorix bombed the colonies. They've destroyed everything." The dragon's gaze didn't waver. "You desecrate this world with your greed, your wars. You awaken us, yet you do not understand the cost." Corwin stepped forward despite himself, his voice trembling. "We didn't know. The legends, no one believed." The dragon silenced him with a growl that made the air vibrate. "We are not legends. We are the guardians of this world, created to protect the seeds of life planted here long before your kind arose. You have brought destruction to what was meant to flourish." Another roar echoed in the distance, and the dragon turned its massive head toward the horizon. More Avorix ships descended, desperate reinforcements pouring into the atmosphere. The dragon's eyes narrowed. "But the greater threat is not you. Not yet." Varn stepped forward, his voice firm despite the fear that gripped him. "If you're here to protect this world, then fight with us. The Avorix won't stop until they've taken everything." The dragon studied him for what felt like an eternity, its glowing eyes unblinking. "We fight for the balance, not for you. But if your enemies seek to destroy this world, they will face our wrath." Without another word, the dragon spread its wings and launched into the sky, joining its brethren in the battle above. Varn watched as the titanic creatures tore through the Avorix fleet, their power unmatched. He felt a strange mix of awe and dread. They had allies now, but their motives were their own, and if humanity was seen as part of the problem, these dragons could just as easily turn their wrath on them. The battle raged on, the skies alight with fire and energy. Varn turned to his team, his voice resolute. "We need to find answers. If these dragons are the guardians of this planet, we have to understand what we've awakened and what it means for all of us. Corwin nodded, his expression grim. Assuming we survive long enough to ask, as the dragons roared their fury into the heavens, Varn couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's fight had only just begun. Whatever ancient forces had been stirred from their slumber, they were far more than allies or enemies. They were something far greater, something humanity had yet to comprehend. The skies above Zytherian were a tempest of fire and fury. Averic's ships, sleek and menacing, darted through the chaos, their plasma cannons hammering down on the planet below. The dragons, colossal and unrelenting, tore through their ranks with terrifying precision. Each swipe of a claw, each blast of energy from their cores, sent debris spiraling into the atmosphere. But for all their power, the battle showed no signs of ending. The Avarics had summoned reinforcements, their ships now numbering in the hundreds. The air crackled with destruction, the ground trembling as if it, too, felt the strain of the conflict. Commander Elias Varn sprinted across the rubble-strewn surface of the central outpost, his boots kicking up ash. Around him, survivors, soldiers, engineers, and civilians worked feverishly to repair what little equipment they could salvage. A communications array flickered with unstable energy, and nearby, a makeshift barricade shielded a small group of medics tending to the wounded. Varn's voice cut through the cacophony. We need those shield generators operational. Now, if the Avarics land troops, we're finished. Lieutenant Corwin emerged from behind a shattered console, sweat streaking his soot-covered face. We rerouted what power we have left, but it's not enough. The generators won't hold against another direct hit. Varn's jaw tightened. Then we make sure they don't get the chance. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the largest dragon, the one that had spoken to him, was locked in combat with an Avaric's dreadnought. The beast's scales glimmered with an iridescent sheen as it maneuvered with impossible grace, its claws carving through the ship's hull. But even as it destroyed its enemies, the dragon's movements seemed slower, more deliberate. They were tiring. The communicator on Varn's wrist crackled to life, the familiar voice of Captain Torin coming through. Commander, this is the solstice. We're entering the system. ETA 5 minutes. What's your status? Varn didn't hesitate. The dragons are holding the line, but barely. The Avaric's fleet is overwhelming. We need orbital support now. Torin's response was grim. Understood. We're deploying fighters and ground reinforcements. Hold your position. As the signal faded, Varn turned to Corwin. Get everyone ready. This isn't over. Before Corwin could respond, the ground beneath them erupted in a shower of molten rock. A smaller dragon, its body covered in jagged, obsidian-like scales, emerged from the fissure. Unlike the others, this one showed no signs of restraint. Its eyes burned with unchecked fury as it launched itself toward the humans, its maw opening to release a torrent of energy. The barricade disintegrated under the blast, sending shrapnel flying. Screams filled the air as survivors scrambled for cover. Varn raised his rifle, his heart pounding. Focus fire. Bring it down. The remaining soldiers obeyed, their weapons lighting up the air. Plasma rounds and railgun slugs struck the dragon's hide, but its scales deflected most of the damage. It roared, a sound that seemed to vibrate through Varn's very bones, and charged forward. Just as it reached them, a shadow passed overhead. The larger dragon, the one Varn had spoken to, descended with a thunderous impact. It intercepted the smaller beast with a swipe of its claw, sending it crashing into a nearby ridge. The two creatures clashed, their roars shaking the ground. The larger dragon pinned its smaller counterpart, its voice a deep rumble. Control yourself. This is not your battle. The smaller dragon snarled, thrashing against its elder. They are invaders, destroyers. Why do you protect them? The larger dragon's glowing eyes turned toward Varn, then back to its kin. Because their fate is tied to this world, as is ours. They may yet prove their worth. The smaller dragon hesitated, its gaze flickering between the humans and its elder. Finally, with a growl of frustration, it retreated, disappearing into the fissure from which it had come. The larger dragon turned to Varn, its expression unreadable. Your people test our patience, human. Do not squander this opportunity. Before Varn could respond, the sky lit up with fresh explosions. The solstice had arrived, its massive hull gleaming as it unleashed a barrage of firepower on the Avrix fleet. Swarms of Earth fighters broke through the blockade, their coordinated strikes forcing the enemy into disarray. The tide was turning, but the cost had been immense. Varn grabbed his communicator. "Captain Torin, we're holding the outpost, but barely. What's the plan?" Torin's voice came through, strained but determined. "We're driving the Avrix back, but their flagship is still operational. If we don't take it out, they'll regroup and finish the job. We need ground support to disable their planetary targeting array. Can you do it?" Varn glanced at Corwin, who nodded grimly. "We'll handle it." As the solstice continued its assault, Varn gathered a small team of soldiers. They moved quickly through the ruins, using the chaos of the battle as cover. The Avrix targeting array loomed ahead, a spire of alien design that pulsed with a sickly green light. Guarded by automated turrets and a squad of Avrix soldiers, it was a fortress unto itself. The team approached cautiously, their weapons ready. Varn gestured for them to spread out, his eyes scanning for weaknesses. The sound of the battle raged behind them, a constant reminder of what was at stake. With a deep breath, he gave the signal. The assault was swift and brutal. The soldiers moved like shadows, taking out the turrets with well-placed explosives and engaging the Avrix troops in close-quarters combat. Varn fought with everything he had, his rifle a blur as he covered his team. One by one, the Avrix fell, their blood staining the ground. Corwin reached the array's control panel, his hands flying over the alien interface. "I need a minute," he shouted over the din. "Make it fast," Varn replied, firing at an approaching enemy. The last Avrix soldier fell, just as Corwin let out a triumphant cry. "Got it. Targeting array is offline." The array's lights dimmed, its hum fading into silence. Above them, the Avrix flagship faltered, its weapons ceasing fire. The solstice seized the opportunity, launching a final barrage that tore through the enemy ship's core. The explosion lit up the sky, a brilliant burst of light that marked the end of the battle. As the Avrix fleet retreated, the dragons circled above, their forms silhouetted against the burning sky. The largest dragon descended once more, its eyes locking onto Varn. "You have fought well, human. But remember, this victory is not yours alone. The balance must be maintained." Varn nodded, exhaustion etched into his features. "We'll do our part. You have my word." The dragon studied him for a moment before lifting into the air, its kin following. Together, they vanished into the clouds, leaving only the echoes of their roars behind. As the dust settled, Varn turned to Corwin, a faint smile breaking through the grime on his face. "We survived," Corwin chuckled, though his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. "Barely." Varn looked to the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking through the smoke. Zytherian had been scarred, its colonies reduced to ruins. But for the first time in days, there was hope. The dragons had awakened, and humanity had earned their respect. For now,